Welcome to Here's the Thing. My name is Vince Negro, and with us on today's program is Tim Lang. Tim, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Vince. Good to be here.
Tim, you've got an interesting background. We'll get to in our second segment in terms of what you're doing today and the programs you with the youth employment services that you run. How did you get involved in this organization? Was it something, you grew up in a family that your father was a former politician, your sister is went off into the media business / media. In some of your previous jobs, you've got an interesting background. How did you ultimately go from all those corporate venues to where you are today?
Yeah, it's a very strange route because most people in the not-for-profit sector have typically been in that sector their whole life. And as you say, I grew up, my dad was a federal cabinet minister during the first Trudeau years, and around us were a lot of lawyers. I thought I might end up in law, but I found that business was more interesting, so I started off in Xerox, and then at Bell Canada, and then at an energy company, and had great success there. Usually driving sales and marketing, but it was about relationship building and inspiring people. As I got into management roles, and then my alma mater, St. Francis Xavier University, needed a vice president called external relations. So I ended up taking that job. I thought, well, that'll be different from the private sector. So I went out there for 5 years and worked closely with Brian Mulrooney because he's an alumnus of St. FX, and helped raise $100 million for St. FX for the Mulrooney Institute of Government, as well as the Frank McKenna Leadership Center, also an alumnus. And then being out in the Maritimes, great place to be for a while, but I wanted to come back to Toronto from Western Canada originally, but most of my career had been here in Toronto. Coming back, I thought I'd be in the private sector, but because of that St. FX, which is technically a not-for-profit, and I had great success there, some not-for-profits asked if I would look at their organization. So that's what led me into Youth Employment Services. Very strange route.
Right. So being in the private sector, and it's corporate driven, even though you worked with people and you had all kinds of things, but there was a whole corporate stress, the whole production, producing. You were with Bell, Xerox, whatever. And going into this almost like this mentoringship kind of program where you work with all the corporations, and at the end of the day, we'll get into that. Did you find the transition from one to another a big jump?
Yeah, it's a question I get a lot, and certainly had it at the university as well. They think, how can you come from the private sector into the university world? Maybe I'm a little biased, but I think the background that you get in some of these really hard-driving private sector jobs, especially like Xerox, where results are everything, and if you don't get your results, you're fired. If you take that mentality into the not-for-profit world, I think it's the best attitude, because there are a lot of people with good hearts in the not-for-profit environment, but at the end of the day, if you're not doing everything you can for the people you're trying to serve, trying to squeeze every juice out of that orange to maximize the dollars to help those people, then in some ways you're failing them. So the private sector background, I think, helped implement some fundamentals at the university and now at Yes that makes it just even that more efficient, more effective. I'm lucky I have a great team at Yes as well. But I think at the end of the day, we've got to be results driven. I mean, it's the same in government. We've got to be more results driven than ever. And so it's really been enjoyable putting those fundamentals into place, because then at the end of the day, if we are more successful, we're helping the clients and the people we want to serve. And we've been able to almost double our growth and help more disadvantaged youth. So it's a good question. People think, how can you come from that background to this? But I personally think it's been very, very effective. And certainly on the relationship building side, it's been important.
Well, the whole thing where you have to reinvent ourselves, like I've been reinventing myself every 5-6 years. You definitely had to reinvent yourself from one sector to the other. Yeah. In your case, just to go back a little bit, to get our viewing audience to know a little bit about you, who would Tim be in high school? Just tell us a little bit about you coming up in high school. Like who was Tim Lang in high school?
Yeah, he's never thought back that far. But I guess I was heavy into sports. That's why I went to St. FX University. I'm not a big guy, but I played football. I was a fast wide receiver, so I was heavy into sports. I went to a Jesuit school. So our new Pope's a Jesuit, so very progressive-minded school. But at the same time, the Jesuits are all about sure, you know, strong sports, but strong academics, so it was very strict, which was good for me because I was a bit of a, you know, let's just say high energy kid, so they kind of whipped me into shape. So yeah, just active in sports, you know, wasn't super outgoing, but I had my, you know, good friends. At that time, again, coming from that political family, I thought, oh, you know, there's lawyers all around me, maybe I'd go into law school. But I knew early on I didn't really enjoy it, or wouldn't have enjoyed it, and ended up in business.
The reason why I asked that question, a lot of people that when they're growing up, they have a particular image of what they want to do, and then, or they get forced into something else. Like you growing up in a family where your father, as you said, was a cabinet minister. Did you ever have any thoughts of getting into that political field?
Yeah, I actually was a candidate in 2004 in the federal election. That was a time I ran as a liberal, and Toronto was all liberals, so there's no openings, but an opening popped up in Durham, a fairly conservative riding, but I won the nomination against, you know, a two-time mayor, and ended up unfortunately losing the election by only a few hundred votes. I think, you know, would have been a good candidate, but I was on the wrong side of some of the issues out there where they were, you know, pro-gun, and I was for gun control at the time with Paul Martin was the Prime Minister, and some other issues, so it was close, but certainly coming from that environment, you did see that the need for wanting to serve and make Canada greater. And I still see that. I mean, who knows where my future will be in the future in one way or another. I still sometimes have the desire to help make our great country greater still.
Well, I think someone like you would be a great candidate. I mean,
thank you.
Those options are always there, and you know the way it's shaping up. There's going to be a provincial or federal election every 2 or 3 years. Just before we break, here in Ontario, there is the whole looming strike with teachers and the whole youth in terms of being out there, and the Ford government yesterday came out to try to buy off parents by offering them $66 to $65 a day and that kind of stuff. What's your opinion on what's happening in Ontario with our education system?
Geez, I mean, good question. We, you know, in my environment now, we work with youth from 15 to 29, but typically it's usually post-high school or some youth who have not gone to high school. We certainly do think and know from the data that the best route to success for employment is making sure you have a high school education, and then even beyond if you can. But the reality is some just don't have that. So we certainly work with any youth in that regard. And then as far as the current environment, I haven't been that close to the negotiations or anything like that. I mean, I hope they resolve it. I know that there are certainly special needs students, because we have a whole segment that we deal with youth with special needs or mental health issues.
Right.
I hope that there's no cuts there, because that's unfortunately, we've seen just a growing issue for youth with special needs, and we've got to do something about it.
Yeah, especially on that autism file. I know a lot of families that have autism children, and it's really hit home in the past year and a half in terms of those programs getting cut.
Yeah.
The whole autism program.